Nashville? More like Crashville. Anyways. So that was a really chaotic race, as seems to be becoming the norm for Nashville, essentially. And then this hat's too small. I'm going to just throw it over there. But anyways, Scott Dixon with another masterclass, I'd say. Coming from essentially having half the not half, that's an analogy, but a much less downforce than you should for running around Nashville. And to be honest, I think it's becoming a bit of a trend that Ganassi cars get in some weird crash that they're somehow able to continue with and manage to go the rest of the race and just kind of sneak their way back up to the front and win. It's funny. I don't get it. Obviously, it's Scott Dixon. It's not nearly as surprising as an Erickson win. I think, especially last year. If this year an Erickson wouldn't exactly be surprising. But Scott Dixon in the last couple of laps, it didn't exactly look like Dixon was much slower than anyone else. He was losing time to, McLaughlin or whoever, and Lingard, but not a lot. It wasn't to the point where it was like, oh yeah, Dixon's going to get past, though that was my thought because of how much damage he had, but it wasn't visible on the track that Dixon was like a bunch slower, which you would think wouldn't be the case considering he had diffuser damage and they had to take off a bunch of front wing to get the car to drive like normal. Like, considering you have way less downforce than you would normally want at a track like this, I just think it's crazy that Dixon was able to continue like he did. But that, I don't know, that's essentially just, it's Dixon being Dixon. I think he's shown, obviously, as we'll talk a little bit about later, Dixon, it's just crazy how good he is in certain situations because, it's why he's won so many championships. He's able to take situations that it's like, oh yeah, you should feasibly be out of any reasonable contention and just kind of show up again. Like, yeah. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the rest of the race here. Now, I've got the IndyCar Twitter feed pulled up here because I didn't take notes for this race. I made the mistake of not taking notes for this race. And, I should have known because it's Nashville. And that's another thing is that crash-filled races are becoming a trend. We'll talk later about everything surrounding, the race. But it seems like crash-filled races are becoming a trend at Nashville, and I'm going to miss some here. I'm going to miss, some incidents that caused the yellow because IndyCar just doesn't have all the replays up on their up on their Twitter page, but that's the best way I can go through this. They haven't posted the highlights yet when I'm recording this, so, it sounds basic. Anyways, one more thing before, we get into the actual race. Noon start times. They're great, aren't they? You can never guarantee that anything different would have happened, but it gives you an extra 3 hours, and that's, essentially what IndyCar should be. So this race was scheduled to start at 3 p.m. It didn't end up starting until around 4:35-ish, sometime, maybe even slightly after that, because of a rain delay. It was more of a lightning delay, not a rain delay, because it's not an oval. But a lightning delay holding up the race, and essentially just meaning that the race didn't start for another hour and a half or so. By the time the race started, the track was reasonably dry. It wasn't entirely dry, but, it was to the point where they could definitely start on dry tires. The main line was pretty dry. If you look at the start of the race, there's not any noticeable, water on the track. There are, if you look at seams and stuff, there's a little bit of water coming out of them, but that's to be expected. So the track was quite dry by the time the race started. I have two complaints here. Lightning delays are too strict, and just start earlier. But, I don't know, it only delayed the race by a few hours, and as annoying as that is, whatever. And as for less strict lightning delay stuff. You know, you can say that every time it happens, but if you say that and then someday someone ends up getting hurt from lightning, you know, who knows? So I think the best solution is just to give yourself more time to do the race. And I don't know why IndyCar is trying to take the NASCAR approach of we're just going to start later because TV ratings. Like, IndyCar, I think, should start at noon or 1 for most of these races. This is an East Coast race. I don't see any reason. It's not a night race. This weird 3 p.m. start time, especially because then it means you're competing with NASCAR. If you started at 1, you would not compete with NASCAR because, you know, generally, not guaranteed, but you'd go from around 1 to 3 with an IndyCar race, a NASCAR race from like 3 to 6, 6:30, and that's your American racing for the day. I think this whole, we're going to change the schedule because, yeah, it doesn't work. I think the best solution is that, and I'd seen some people pointing this out on Twitter, just, you know, the fact that there's an IndyCar and a NASCAR race at the same time, the fact that there's an IndyCar and a NASCAR race in the same day is cool. The issue is they're at the same time. So, you know, you've got to split one race the other. I watched IndyCar. I know a lot of people watch NASCAR. The funny thing is they ended up ending the 2 races at basically the same time, so it's not even like you could watch the IndyCar race and then flip over for the last 30 minutes of the NASCAR race. They're literally going on at the exact same time, starting around the same time, ending at the same time. It's annoying. Just IndyCar, if you're watching, which you're not because I'm a channel with 200 subs, and not anyone of any importance, but if somehow someone in any position of power is watching this, change the schedule. I get it, there's TV ratings, but there's more TV ratings in not competing with NASCAR because I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying they were watching the NASCAR race, but they would have watched an IndyCar race if they were able to. So if you're wanting TV ratings, just don't compete with NASCAR. It's simple. Just start a race at noon or 1. You give yourself more time in the event of a rain delay. You put yourself in a position where if there's no rain delay, you're not going to be competing with NASCAR. I don't see any reason at all why you wouldn't do this. But who knows? IndyCar seems like they don't listen to what we say sometimes, but, you know, hopefully they will. Hopefully there will be other people pointing this out because, you know, if David Land says something about it, it'll at least become more of a thing in the fan base than random Joe on the internet. But anyways, I've been rambling on about the weather for too long, and my dog's squeaking her toy in the background. So, to the start of the race, Scott McLaughlin led the field to the green next to Romain Grosjean. And off the start, and for the first couple laps, it was actually clean, which is somewhat surprising for Nashville, though I believe that happened last year, too. Or I think they made it a lap around and there were crashes. I don't know. They made it to the first few laps clean, but that was about all they could do until Kellett did something. We had a certified Dalton Kellett moment. When going down into turn number 4 at the end of the first long straightaway, Dalton Kellett had Colton Herta on his outside and essentially didn't realize that or didn't care and just kind of put him into the wall coming into turn 4 into the, I call it the castle section because this track is a lot like Baku and this is a lot like the castle section at Baku, but it's the turn 4 to 8 technical tight section. There's not a good name for it at the beginning of that turn 4. Now that meant that Herta, obviously he hit the wall. That knocked his front wing off and may or may not have messed up something with the front end. Herta, once they had replaced the wing, was complaining about the car, though I don't know how much that's the car actually being messed up or just, you know, you hit the wall and you assume the car is going to suck and you have some type of confirmation bias if you do something weird in the corner that, oh, the car just sucks. Like, I don't know. It's possible either way. But Herta went a lap down getting repairs, and that ended up being a interesting situation for the rest of the race. But that wasn't it for the Andretti drivers having trouble, because Alexander Rossi, a few laps later, just kind of stalled it in going into, I exactly know what corner this is. I'm looking at a replay. This is turn 10, I believe. Just kind of locked up the brakes and just stalled the engine, apparently. which it was apparently an issue. This happened to Kellett in morning warm-up, where essentially you lock up the rear brakes, which stalls the motor, and didn't essentially get the rear wheels moving again in time to bump start the engine. So you just, you come to a stop with the rear wheels locked and the engine stalls. It's a really bizarre situation because, like, you locked up in a corner, but you didn't do much else, but you stalled the car. And originally I thought this was just, when I saw it in morning warm-up, I thought it was just a Dalton Kellett being Kellett situation. But the fact that Rossi did it confirms to me that this is a bit of an issue at Nashville. There's not much you can do to fix it. It's the way the technical side of the sport works, but it's weird. It's weird to see. So, I don't know. That's the locking up the brakes and stalling the engine. Now, Rossi also went a lap down from that. And that meant, of course, that you have Rossi and Herta a lap down. They were able to get back on the lead lap later in the race, as we'll talk about. But for about half the race, it was probably somewhere between, lap 30, lap 40, something like that, I think, that they got back on the lead lap and were able to continue the race. Yeah, that was about how that worked. So they spent the first half or so of the race just kind of trying to figure out a way to get back on the lead lap, which, with the amount of yellows there are at Nashville, is easier than if there aren't any yellows, because, of course, if there's a yellow, you can get a wave around or something if you don't pit. Anyways, there was a moment a little bit later on in the race where Elio spun by himself, going onto the first bridge section, which I believe happened to Cody Ware last year. That's a weird thing. That was a yellow that got brought out. But the next thing is a much, much more interesting situation, as we had a bit of a, I don't even know what to call it, just a million incidents happening in the turn 4 to 8 section. Somewhere around turn 6. I don't exactly know what the corner numbers are. I'm not looking at a track map. Anyways, there were a couple of separate incidents happening. First of all, there was a stack up near the front of the field where Patto Award, so you have Will Power in front. Power's checking up for everyone else checking up in front of him. Patto checks up. This is coming into a hard braking zone up a hill with a blind corner before it, so it's hard to see. Patto sees that Will's checking up. He checks up. Graham Rahal behind Patto does not see it in time and plows into the back of Award. That essentially kills his gearbox, theoretically. And Patto has his motor still running, but doesn't have any gears. The assumption that Patto had said is that they probably broke a gear and then they couldn't get between gears. When you hit the gearbox, it's how it works with an IndyCar. It's funny that you have a gearbox sitting in an exposed position like that, but it's just how it is. If you hit that, it's pretty much race over. So Patto plows into the back of Will Power, who manages to keep the car somewhat straight throughout the next corner, which was quite an interesting situation. And then Graham Rahal, who was behind Patto, broke his front wing and then was trying to drive the car back to the pits, and on the bridge section, coming back to the pits, essentially he had the front wing stuck underneath the car, and the car just went straight. The front wheels didn't have enough grip to turn the car. He went straight, hit the wall, and that messed up his steering. He went in and replaced the front wing just to see if that was the issue. It was not. He was going down the pit lane like this, so they had to retire the car. So that was Graham Rahal and Patto Award out of the race. Also, further back, there was a bit of a weird kerfuffle going on with probably... Oh, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the replay on the Twitter feed, and it played audio for some reason. Anyways, further back, of course, there's still people checking up to avoid not only people in front checking up for no reason, but now a crash. And people like Dalton Kellett, Calamilot, other people, I don't know who else because there's not a very good replay angle of it, ended up piling into the back of each other and the wall and all types of other stuff. Kellett ended up out of the race. Ilott ended up stuck back a couple of laps down, and there were other cars involved. I just don't have a replay angle of it. But yeah. Oh, sorry, I missed something. I originally didn't know where Dixon got his damage from, but I just saw it on the replay now. Anyways, I'll talk about that in a second. The other car involved, apparently, now that I've just found that out, was Scott Dixon, who, in that situation, got plowed into from behind, I assume by Dalton Kellett. That was what damaged his diffuser. I didn't know that. I had probably forgotten it, but anyways, that was what ended up giving Dixon the damage that he had. So, of course, they had to go in and take a bunch of front wing out to get the car to run properly, but it's cool that they did that. So, anyways, next incident, moving on after the giant pileup of giant proportions that took out 7 cars. Devlin DeFrancesco and Takuma Sato had an incident going into turn 10 that I still can't exactly assign any blame to. Sato was really mad at Devlin, and apparently he was trying to go after him. But after looking at the replay, I can't exactly say that it was really his fault. Now, it took NBC forever to get a replay that actually showed anything on this. They had a replay essentially from, if you imagine this is the corner, they had a replay from about here, and the cars were here, in a corner like this. Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out. Anyways, it showed about the last half a second of the crash, but that was just Sato and Devlin going into the wall. After finally getting a replay from Colton Herta's car about 20 laps later, it showed that Devlin was about a quarter of a car length, half a car length off the wall on the inside. Sato didn't realize that and kind of held pretty narrow at the exit of the corner, and Devlin drove into him. You could say it's Devlin because I don't think it was Devlin. He missed the apex a little bit, sure, but Sato also held pretty narrow on the exit of the corner, and they came together, and apparently, as has been the case at Nashville for some reason a bunch today, they ended up just kind of going straight into the wall. So apparently when 2 cars touch at Nashville, they just kind of go straight on for no reason. Anyways, that was the last real thing that happened for quite a while. I believe there's another yellow with 10 to go. Yeah, sorry, there was another yellow with around 10 to go. I'm looking at the feed here and there's nothing on it. There's another yellow around 10 to go with Kyle Kirkwood and Dave Malukas, with what I can only describe as multiple rookie incidents between both rookie mistakes between both drivers that ended up taking them both out in turn 9. Turn 9 after the second bridge section. So anyways, David Malukas is in front of Kyle Kirkwood. Kirkwood goes up the inside of Malukas. It's a bit of a late dive. Rookie mistake number 1. He sent it way too late. He was only up his inside by the time he started braking. It's hard to react at that point. Next thing, Kirkwood, of course, continues his send because Kirkwood and is alongside and even slightly in front of Malukas, from what I remember, coming into the corner. But Malukas still turns in on him and puts Kirkwood into the wall. That's probably rookie mistake number 2, so I'd say one thing on both drivers at this point. And then, Kirkwood has no steering at that point, and Malukas just kind of just keeps going. And, at that point, they've hit each other. Kirkwood's hit the wall, and he's on the inside, so he's just going to go straight and take out Malukas. There's not much else that can happen at this point. They were still going pretty quickly, so honestly, I'm not even sure they would have made the corner even if Malukas didn't turn in on him, because I think both of them were carrying too much speed because they hit the wall pretty hard. Anyways, both of them stuffed it in the tire barrier. That was race over for both of them, and that stacked up the field with about 10 to go. Joseph Newgarden at this point was leading, but it was on an off strategy. He had to come in and pit, so he ended up losing. He ended up getting shuffled to the back, which wasn't a lot. I think at that point there were like 14 cars left in the lead lap, and it was going to be even less by the end of the race. But that put Newgarden back at the end of the lead lap, and they restarted with around 10 to go. And then At that point, we had gone the whole race without a Jimmy incident, and considering it's Nashville, something had to happen at some point. So, coming into turn 4, at the end of the first bridge section, Jimmy just kind of lost the rear end and spun it straight into the wall. He was out of the race. This is oddly similar to an incident he had in the race last year, not in the race, in warm-up last year. You just lose the rear end and braking, and at that point, you're spinning, and he ends up hitting the inside wall for turn 4. It's weird that he's crashed there twice, and no one else has crashed there, to my knowledge, in the way he has. I don't know if it's a Jimmy doing something weird thing. It's possibly a brake locking thing. I don't know what it is. It's a fast corner. You're turning. It's understandable that you could have brake lock there. I think for a guy like Jimmy, it's excusable that would happen. But it still did happen. That brought out the yellow with around, what would it have been, 8 to go? Anyways, they get that cleaned up in a remarkably quick time, only around 3 laps, considering that there was, a car with a wheel broken that, you can't just push it back somewhere. They had to get the tow truck or whatever out and, get the car back behind the wall. They were able to do that in just a few laps, and they restarted with 5 to go. So, anyways, here's the biggest controversy of the race to this point. Joseph Newgarden, who has worked his way back up through the field, decides that he's going to make the send of the millennium and send it up the inside of not 1, not 2, but 3 Andretti cars. Romain Grosjean, from the back, you have Alexander Rossi, then Colton Herta, then Romain Grosjean, who had just sent it up the inside of Colton Herta. This is on a restart, keep in mind, so the field's packed very close together. Newgarden gets up the inside of Rossi. He's way quicker than Rossi. He's way quicker than Herta into the braking zone. He gets to the inside of Grosjean. Grosjean somehow manages to leave him enough room to get through the corner. Newgarden is alongside of Grosjean at this point, at the apex of the corner. It's very obvious he's carrying way too much speed. But Grosjean's able to give him enough space. Props to him for doing that. That is some quick reaction time, especially considering he just got done passing Herta and is probably still trying to clear himself. The fact that he was able to realize, oh yeah, Newgarden's sending it up the inside. Great job by him. But that wasn't the end of it. What happened next was weird. And subject to some amount of controversy and some amount of NBC booth ass-kissing from Townsend Bell and co. Apologize for the language there. Newgarden, again, carrying way too much speed, just kind of acts like Grosjean isn't there on the exit of the corner. He hits him, Grosjean goes straight into the wall, and that's Grosjean's race over. Newgarden is able to continue fine. So, looking back at this, Newgarden sends it up the inside of 3 cars on a restart, and considering that Grosjean just passed Herta. That is a reckless move if I've ever seen one. He must have missed the braking zone by 1.5 miles. But I think that in itself is dumb. But if he doesn't hit anyone, it's not the end of the world. And Grosjean, again, somehow manages to realize he's there. At the exit of the corner, Newgarden, through some combination of carrying too much speed and, I don't know, just kind of not caring about Grosjean's existence, drives straight into him and ends up taking him out. In my opinion, this should 1,000% warrant an avoidable contact penalty. People were comparing it to Felix Rosenqvist at Toronto, and I would say yes, but also Rosenqvist didn't send it up the inside of 3 cars before that. That's where the avoidable comes in my opinion. Rosenqvist at Toronto was much less avoidable than this, because if you're Joseph Newgarden, the way you avoid it is by not yeeting it up the inside of 3 cars from about 1 million miles back. I think that warrants a penalty. IndyCar didn't. The NBC booth thought it was a great move, which is dumb and wrong. That's stupid. But people hate Grosjean. I don't know, that you'll get what you get from that. I don't know. There ended up being no penalty from IndyCar. And because the race was almost over, IndyCar decided they would red flag it to clean up the crash. So they had a lot of time to debate this, but they ended up choosing to not penalize Newgarden. Considering that enough people were comparing it to Toronto, I think it's somewhat reasonable that you would just say consistency, we shouldn't penalize them. I think you should. That could possibly be biased. It's not biased because I like Grosjean, because honestly I don't, but I might not know what I'm talking about. I'm not IndyCar race control, and to be honest, I'm not trying to take into account the fact that I haven't penalized the last few drivers that did it. So I think if this is in a vacuum, you should definitely penalize them. Not in a vacuum, I don't know what you can do. It's just race control's put himself in a bad position. And then there was this from Joseph Newgarden discussing essentially what happened.
Let's start with the contact with Grosjean. You made a big move there, but what was your take on the incident there?
Well, I was alongside him fully, if not a little bit ahead. I haven't seen it from the outside, but certainly not trying to. Yeah, I mean, I'm already ahead of him at that point. So, welcome to IndyCar. It gets tight, He's been on a worse end of that. I don't know what to tell him, Good thing I was ahead. That's the biggest thing. You're going to want to be ahead of this guy on this type of moment. But, yeah, it's tight street course racing. Let me tell you what, I about got taken out 6 times myself. Probably need to have just some discussion with some of the younger guys, but they're aggressive. They're very aggressive, and if you're not aggressive back, then you get run over. So that's IndyCar racing. You got to learn that pretty quick. I don't like it, but that's the game that we're in. Ultimately, we had a big fight back with the BBG car and Team Chevy. That's all I can say. This has been a really frustrating year in a lot of ways, and the way it's built. We've won a lot of races. We've had a ton of good luck, all thanks to the team and the effort that they put in. But more than not, we're either winning the race or things are completely going against us one way or another. And so it's built frustration for me because it's hard to see that happen for this crew when they work so hard. And I hate it too. I'm very competitive, and happens a couple times a year where things don't go your way. It's part of the luck, but it's just happened one too many times. And today was another unlucky day with just the way the whole thing played out. And you just can't predict these races. It's part of the game, but it can be frustrating at times.
So that just makes him look stupid. If he would have just shut his mouth, honestly, I think he probably could have gotten away with it, But the position that Newgarden's taking here, which is that's racing, no, I'm sorry. Just because it's Nashville, you don't get a free pass to wall people. And I would argue just because it's Grosjean doesn't mean you get an excuse to wall him. He does take the position here in discussing the actual incident. He takes the position that he is ahead of Grosjean at this point. Now, he's not arguing he's entirely ahead of him. He's arguing that essentially the nose of his car is ahead of Grosjean's car. So he essentially has the right to act like he's not there. If he was 3/4 of a car length in front of him, I would understand that. The issue is that he is inches ahead of him at that point. I don't know what the letter of the law is, so I might be wrong, and I'm fine for you to point it out if I am. But I don't believe that just barely being in front of someone in a corner essentially entitles you to act like they don't exist. That's the issue here. He acted like Grosjean essentially just didn't exist because he was barely ahead of him. If racing becomes that, I don't know how to justify it. Because, it ends up being, if I just kind of go in here at 150 miles an hour into a, big braking zone, I was technically ahead of them when I hit them, so it's all fine. So, when you start getting into that territory, and your argument is, I was a half an inch ahead of him, so I'm entitled to take him out, no. When you start doing that, that's the extreme it's going to go to. It probably won't actually get there, but it could theoretically be taken to that extreme. I think it's dumb. I think IndyCar could stand to gain something from maybe saying something in a driver's meeting that, hey, you have to be significantly ahead of someone to just kind of, move in front of them instead of just, barely ahead. That's something you could point out in a driver's meeting. I can't imagine much will actually happen. I don't think they'll penalize him or something. after the race, but it was a weird situation. But, as I had said, that left us with a red flag with 4 laps to go and a restart later on with a lap and a half to go, since the start-restart line is at the, it's going into turn 9 at the end of the second backstretch, or the second bridge stretch. I don't know what to call it. And the start-finish line is right behind Titan Stadium. So that left him with about a lap and a half to go. And Scott Dixon, the order at that point was Scott Dixon, Scott McLaughlin, Alex Palou, Rossi, Herta. No, not Rossi, Herta. Actually, no, I believe it was that. So Dixon, McLaughlin, Palou, Herta, no, whatever. Rossi, Herta, something there. I don't have a way to go back and check. Anyways, on the restart, essentially, despite the fact, so Dixon and McLaughlin both had, like 50 seconds of push to pass left. So the way they managed it, they could basically hold the push to pass button the entire last lap. That's not entirely legal. I think there's some amount of time you're allowed to hold it for, but they could have if they wanted to. So, that ended up being the situation. If McLaughlin was the only one in that situation, I think he would have easily passed Dixon. The issue is Dixon had just enough to defend, and considering it was only a lap, he didn't have many attempts at him. You can maybe do something into the braking zone at turn 9 on the restart. You probably can't, and then at that point, that just leaves you with turn 4 and turn 9 of the next lap, which, if you do it for 3 or 4 laps, you'll have a chance, but if you do it just 1 lap, it's very possible that you won't end up with a decent chance, and that was what McLaughlin ended up with. So, coming through turn 9, Dixon gets through turn 10. McLaughlin considers making a move up the inside in turn 11, though he's a decent way behind him at that point. Coming out of the final corner, Dixon is a little bit slow out, considering, the loss of downforce. McLaughlin ends up right on his rear bumper. He comes to his inside. It's a drag race to the finish line at that point, but it wasn't enough. Dixon ended up taking the win from Scott McLaughlin. I think if this race went a couple of laps longer, McLaughlin might have won. But Dixon, considering his performance from this race, not only, a win, but a win with the amount of damage he had, he deserved the win. I think McLaughlin had the best car, but Dixon deserved the win. So I'm going to go ahead and run down through the results at this point, and then we'll talk championship implications. Of course, Scott Dixon winning. That has big championship implications. Dixon at this point is only 6 points behind the championship leader as of the end of this race, Will Power. So Dixon all of a sudden has catapulted himself to the front of the championship battle. This is a very good race for him. I haven't really thought of it for the majority of the season, but all of a sudden, like I had said, Dixon could win the championship this year. And, considering the way he's been doing for the last while, if he continues that performance for the last couple of races, he's only 6 points back from Will Power. Will Power has been having, an up and down. It seems like every race he's either, top 2 or, getting taken out by Devlin DeFrancesco. I think it's very possible that if Dixon keeps his nose clean like it seems like he always does, Dixon could end up winning the championship this year, which I literally haven't thought about the possibility of that legitimately happening until about today. So that's interesting. Second is Scott McLaughlin, who has probably one of his best performances ever. Again, just missed, ending up with the win there. I think it's the second time finishing second to Scott Dixon, because he ended up doing it last year at Texas. Though this was, they're talking about it on the NBC broadcast, this was the best fight, I think, between Dixon and McLaughlin that we've seen. And considering they're both from New Zealand, I think that's pretty cool to have, a countryman battle. It's interesting that when it ends up that way. Really good race from McLaughlin still. It's a really good points day. He puts himself 6th in the championship right now. 58 points back, which it isn't great for being in championship contention. It's more than a race. But I think if people around him, Palou, Newgarden, end up with some bad luck, he could reasonably end up in the top 5 in the championship standings, without a doubt. Again, this is a great race for Palou, or this is not a great race for Palou. Great race for McLaughlin. I guess I'll talk about Palou in a second, because it is a pretty good race for him. Good race for McLaughlin. He puts himself in a really good position to capitalize in the point standings. And just all-around great weekend from McLaughlin. He was on pole and second in the race. Despite not getting the win, he really would have been a good weekend either way. I had alluded to him a few seconds ago, but third was Alex Palou. He's going to end up 5th in the championship standings after this race, only 33 points behind Will Power. Pretty good day, pretty good points day for him. Again, he's gaining on Will Power. He gained on Newgarden and Erickson. So for the people that are around him at this point, good day for Palou. P3 with, I believe they're having some type of, yeah, he had a front wing that he had knocked off essentially, or knocked loose half of the front wing element. So to finish the race with that, I guess another wounded car finishing in the top few spots. So I've got a lot of noise going on in the background. I'm just sitting in my bedroom. I apologize. Anyways, another damaged car in the top few spots. Good race for Palou. 4th, Alexander Rossi, coming back from the weird locking up the brakes and stalling the car incident from a lap down to P4. Good weekend for Rossi, considering the circumstances around it. I think similar to what happened with McLaughlin and Dixon, if Rossi had a few more laps, he probably would have passed Palou, because again, he had damage. But I guess Palou was also running apparently some of the fastest laps of the race with half his wing broken. So, who knows? 5th was Colton Herta, similar to Rossi, had an incident and was able to come back and finish in the top 5, despite being a lap down. The only difference is Herta actually had damage. Rossi just stalled the car. So I'd say more impressive from him, more from the perspective that he didn't damage the car when getting Daltoned, essentially. But P5, pretty good for Colton. He's in a position in the championship standings. He's 10th right now. So really needing good races that he finishes to be in a position to contend for, finishing decent in the points. And it seems like he's done that. Speaking of point standings, Rossi, who I just noticed is ahead of Colton, moves up to P8 in the championship standings, passing up Felix Rosenqvist. As of right now, he's 61 points behind the next guy ahead of him, which is Patto Award. There's a bit of a break there, and Award before this race was within a race of the championship. At this point, it's reasonable to mark Patto out of actual championship contention. Obviously, down pretty far. They're still mathematically eligible, but this race really hurt Patto. We'll talk about that later. Anyways, Rossi moves up to P8. Herta has a decent points day in P5 in the race, P10 in the standings. He's going to need more of those races to keep, moving up. 6th was Joseph Newgarden, of course, despite the surefire avoidable contact penalty that somehow didn't get called. He finishes 6th in the race, which I think is okay, considering that with 10 laps to go, he had to pit. But then again, that means he had new tires with 10 to go. So, a mix of situations for Newgarden. Probably not the greatest race, but he's oddly enough, I'd say not the greatest race, because a lot of the people around him in the standings finished ahead of him. But, he stayed out of trouble in terms of not getting taken out, and was able to finish P6, which, considering the amount of people that actually finished this race, decent for him. 7th, Felix Rosenqvist with a pretty average day. Obviously, he ended up getting passed by Rossi in the point standings. That puts him back to P9. Not much to note on for Felix. 8th was Christian Lingard, who started this race off in P3. This was a really good weekend for Lingard that just didn't end up going his way late in the race. With only a few laps to go before yellows started raining, he was in the top three, and it looked like he was possibly even going to end up passing Dixon on one of the restarts. It was Dixon, Lingard, McLaughlin, and it looked like there was a pretty decent chance that Lingard could have ended up winning the race if it stayed green. Of course it didn't. Restarts happened. McLaughlin ended up getting kind of quietly shuffled back. I didn't even realize he finished P8. I kind of forgot about him because he wasn't, immediately up there. And I looked down and I'm like, how did he end up back there? But anyways, really somewhat disappointing end to the race for Lingard. But there's a lot to take away from this weekend that I think for Lingard and the entire RLL team, they're improving, which is good to see. Ninth was Simon Pagenaud with a really quiet, really average day, stayed out of trouble and was able to get P9. P10 was Jack Harvey, who was pretty far back in the field for most of the race, but just by staying out of trouble, he was able to finish in the top 10. 11th and final car on the lead lap was Will Power. He was having apparently some pretty major ECU issues, and I'm making up a term. He was having some pretty major engine issues. They had to put the engine into emergency mode, which essentially means you're losing a bunch of the, assists that a modern IndyCar has. Stuff like, like ECU blipping for shifting and keeping your foot on the gas, but the car, I guess that's just ECU blipping. He lost the shift lights on his wheel, so essentially he's having to listen to the car to hear, where do I shift, which probably sounds easy, but I'm sure is quite hard. So I think for Will, being able to stay on the lead lap was pretty good for him. He spent a lot of the race with a car that just kind of wasn't up to par with the rest of the field and was still able to not end up retiring from the race, which, considering the circumstances around it, is pretty decent. First car off the lead lap was Rinus VeeKay, who seemed like he was just kind of sitting around and gathering whatever points he could from cars crashing and trying to see if he could get back on the lead lap. He was one lap down, I believe. Yes, he was. And from pretty far back in the field after, I believe it was running into Graham Rahal, he is able to finish P12, which, despite finishing off the lead lap, pretty good for him. He was able to pass a lot of the cars that he was able to pass a lot of people that ended up in wrecks after he ended up in his crash with Rahal. So decent recovery day for Rinus VeeKay. 13th Elio, he had spun. Obviously, I'd shown that earlier, I believe, coming out of, what would that be, turn 3, and ended up stalling the car, and that kind of killed his day, so he ran around a lap down for most of the race, trying to see if he could get a lap back. Didn't end up happening, and that was the end of the race for him. Marcus Erickson, who was kind of just off the front group for most of the race, had some type of engine issue late in the race, and it looked like they were possibly going to be able to fix it and stay on the lead lap. That didn't end up happening. Erickson stalled it, would have been when Grosjean crashed. Yeah, when Grosjean crashed, because there was a red flag there. He ended up stalling the car on the way back, and that was the end of the race for them. They might have brought it back to pit lane, but they ended up retiring the car. Broadcast didn't really show it very well. 15th Callum Ilott, of course, ended up in the crash with Dixon and Kellett and whatever else happened there. Again, like a lot of other people throughout here, was able to just kind of keep the car on track and finish the race. Romain Grosjean, already discussed that. Disappointing end of the race for him. If he would have just kept in the position he would, it would have been a big points day for him. 17th was Connor Daly. He ended up in a, was it a crash? I think it was a crash at some point, and finished 6 laps down. I guess good recovery from him. He's passing multiple people. I guess it is what it is. Jimmy in P18, he was last on the lead lap for quite a while, and if it would have finished, would have been P12, but, well, he probably wouldn't have been P12 because the Grosjean crash wouldn't have happened, but would have been a good points day for him. He didn't lose a lot of spots from crashing, but, of course, he did destroy a car. I don't know, it's a bit of a Jimmy performance. That sounds harsh, but it's not terrible, but of course you crashed a car, so I don't know, but a lot of other people did too. Kyle Kirkwood in P19 and David Malukas in P20. They both had really good days going, and honestly, I wish it would have ended better for them because, Lord, do both of them need a good finish, especially Kyle Kirkwood, who apparently this is his 9th DNF of the season, which that is like, I mean, I can't think of things that would match that other than like really slow 90s F1 teams that just couldn't get through a race without their engine blowing up on them. Like 9 DNFs in a season. Not all those have been his fault, but when you have 9 DNFs in a season, some of those are definitely your fault, and this one was partially his fault. It was a racing incident. But Kellett needs to stop crashing because AJ's not going to be able to pay for that. They've already had to take the 11 car off the track, and for some reason, AJ's trying to get Porsche LMDH, so, keep the car on the track. Kyle, but I don't know, he's a rookie, he's adjusting. David Malukas, really good day going for him, and it really sucks that had it end the way it did. Takuma Sato and Devlin DeFrancesco, P21 and 22. Similar situation for them. They ended up taking each other out, ended up losing a lot of time. Sucks for both of them. Move on to their next race. Graham Rahal, who ended up crashing twice in this race, despite only running 29 laps. It really, really sucks for Graham. I don't know. They're going to have to get it together because a teammate definitely has. Lingard, of all people, can, compete in the top couple of drivers. It seems like if you're going to say a Rahal driver is driving in the top 5, it should be Graham Rahal, but it's not, and I don't know why that is. He crashed twice today. One of them wasn't his fault. No, one of them he was kind of a victim of circumstance and bad reaction time, and the other one he just kind of drove it into the wall at the exit of turn 4. Not a good day for Graham. Patto in P24. He was a complete victim of circumstance. Ended up having to retire. Really bad points day for Patto. He was within 50 points of the championship lead. And after this race, he is back to P7 in the standings. It really sucks for Patto Award. 25th, Dalton Kellett. Took out Herta. Was involved in the other giant crash. I don't know. Dalton's going to have to get his stuff together because, just like I was talking about with Kirkwood, Dalton's going to have to, not crash cars. But I don't think that's been a big problem for... I say that like that's a big problem. It's not. Just Kellett needs to, stop having incidents. It's like he's becoming the new Jimmy. It's like sometime in the race there's going to be a caution for something he did. You can't do that, but I don't know. In 26th, Simona Di Silvestro and Pareto Autosport. It always sucks when a small team like that ends up in a crash. Again, they ended up in the same... I'm trying to think of all the people that would have been involved in it. Kellett, Award, Rahal, Ilott, Dixon. That giant crash. Seems like they ended up in that crash and ended up finishing last in the race. It really sucks for them because, the way their team works, obviously they're down a lot of experience to the entire rest of the field. So, it stinks when they're at the back and they get caught up and stuff like that. You'd really like to see them do better, but I don't know. And that's Nashville. I've probably rambled on for way too long at this point, but that's the video. I'm not going to be able to cut much of it off because I feel like I'm talking about important stuff the whole time. This race was just jam-packed. Again, I talked about in the IMSA video, and I think I'm going to end up posting this on Monday. So I talked about in the IMSA video yesterday. I'll be posting a next-gen review. I'll probably end up doing it today because I already have it uploaded to YouTube. I just have to, fill out all the details and post the video. So I'll probably have that later today. Might end up doing it tomorrow. One of the two. But yeah, that's Nashville. That was a really, really chaotic race. I think they need to consider this. They need to reconsider this race for the sake of the team's wallets. If nothing else, reconsider the track layout. It's cool, but Lord, is it chaotic. Like, it's just so dumb that we have a road course race that we can't get 10 laps on without crashing. So, I I'm conflicted on whether or not I want them to reconsider it or not. It's fun to watch. It's fun to see cars that shouldn't at all be contending for anything winning races. It's fun to see the Ericksons. It's fun to see the Dixon wins like this. But it's gonna get concerning at some point. The first year it was fun. This year it was kind of fun. Considering this is becoming a trend at this point, I don't know. But Nashville is definitely a good market for a race, I think. Maybe they could just go race at Nashville Super Speedway because ovals, and that way you're not going to tear up a million cars. Or maybe you would. I don't know. But yeah, that's Nashville. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I am going to go to bed and edit this video tomorrow. Bye.